Today's episode is brought to you by Forvis Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Do you get nervous when you have to speak in front of a group of people? Sweaty palms, dry mouth? A lot of people do. But if it's part of your job or something you have to do, how do you overcome those fears and deliver a presentation that's uplifting and engaging? For starters, don't think about yourself. Think about your audience, says Col Fink. Col's a business coach and talented public speaker. In fact, he's written a book called Speakership, which outlines how to lead and grow a business with public speaking. First, Chris Ashmore asks Colin why business owners should care about their ability to speak in public.
I mean, there's probably two different ways you can think about it, internally and externally. Internally, I think public speaking just has an incredible ability to change the way that it feels to be in a place and to follow a leader. And good public speaking is inspiring and galvanizing and energizing. And there's just something about a really good speech and a really good experience. And that's the thing. It's like a synchronous experience. We're all here together. And someone at the front of the room, even if it's not a formal speaking engagement, but just someone at the front of the room speaking in a way that brings us all together can be really galvanizing for a team. And so internally, I think it's worth caring about speaking because it can have such a material effect on the culture of a place and even on the productivity and the output of a business. So that's one reason to care. And then externally, we obviously live in a highly media-saturated world. There's advertising and social media coming at us from every angle. And public speaking is one of these rare occasions in our lives where we kind of get back to what it's really like to be a human. And again, you get a room full of real people who are together having a real experience. And as a speaker, if you don't have to captivate a room, but even just interest them or entertain them or engage them just a bit. You don't have to be brilliant, just be kind of decent. It can be the most memorable thing that happens in a person's day. And for someone running a business, if there's any value at all in being seen as an expert, a thought leader, an industry leader, I don't think there's a single strategy more effective than good public speaking to develop your credentials in that space. And done well, a good speech can fill your sales pipeline for a year.
Wow.
And so why care about speaking? Well, because it saves you a lot of faffing around, list building and funnel building and all that kind of stuff. Do one good speech to the right audience and compel them in the right way, and you can have your sales pipeline pretty much sorted for a whole year. To me, that's a pretty good use of an hour.
Absolutely. Now, from your experience, Col, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make when it comes to public speaking?
So whether people do this consciously or it's just kind of the default action that we take when we're given the opportunity to speak, nearly every speech, I find, is generally a person creating a script in response to the question that is never asked, but which is implicit in the process, which is, what am I going to say? So you find out you've got a speaking opportunity and you go, oh, right, what am I going to say? And then what people tend to do is they sit down either with Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, some electronic tool generally, and they create a script that kind of tells them what they're going to say. And I would argue that this has a number of negative outcomes that it produces. The first is that by creating a script, you've created a right way and a wrong way to do your speech. And this is where a lot of the fear and nervousness comes from, because you think to yourself, oh, what am I supposed to say next? Because you've created this script and it's got this and then that and then this and then that. And you get nervous because you can't remember what's coming next. And that makes you nervous and you make mistakes and you get flustered and all the rest of it. Well, if you don't have a rigid script, you don't have to worry about what comes next. You can say whatever feels natural. Secondly, and I think this is really important, when you say, what am I going to say? Like when you're answering the question, what am I going to say? You're starting the whole process by thinking about yourself. A much more useful question to ask, and I would love it if everybody listening now took this question away, and the next time you get an opportunity to speak, try to stop yourself from answering the question, what am I going to say? And instead, answer the question, what do I want them to do? Like, I'm going to have an audience in the room with me for 10 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour. What do I want them to do? Do I want them to take notes? Do I want them to contribute their own stories and facts? Do I want them to learn something from me, then take it away and do more research and look into installing X, Y, or Z in their business? Like, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to ring you afterwards because this is explicitly about setting up sales conversations? It doesn't matter what you say, really. A speech is a speech. Who cares? What matters is, what does the audience do in response? How does the speech affect them? And if you can create a speech, prepare a speech, in answer to the question, what do I want them to do? You're likely to create a much more compelling speech. You're likely to spend a lot more time thinking about them than thinking about yourself. And what that means is you're much less likely to get nervous because the whole thing, you're looking forward and out into the audience, not back and in at yourself. So the biggest mistake is answering the question, what am I going to say? Ask instead, what do I want them to do?
Fantastic. Are some people naturally better at speaking? Do you have to be a natural speaker to be good at it?
I mean, I think people have natural inclinations, like we're all different people, and there's definitely some people who come to public speaking more easily than others. I reckon the big misnomer is that a lot of people think you have to be extroverted to be a public speaker, and I don't think that's true at all. I think comedy, in fact, is one of the best examples of public speaking in action, and many of the best comedians are actually rampaging introverts who let out their only extroverted moment on a stage in front of an audience, and then they go lock themselves in their room again. What makes a good speech, honestly, and a good speaker is not a particular kind of person, but in fact just a person who is willing to be themselves while speaking. There's something about speaking to an audience that can turn us into a cardboard cutout version of ourselves, where we talk in a funny voice or we move in a weird way, or we just there's just this weird false version of us that shows up because I assume we're trying to conform to various stereotypes about what a good speaker is supposed to do. In actual fact, anyone can be a good speaker, and the key is for that person, any person, whoever you are, to simply learn to be yourself while you're speaking. And if you're introverted and softly spoken and nerdy or, whatever, you've got these ideas of negative character traits for speaking, they're not negative character traits at all. If you can learn to just be you while speaking, we'll appreciate it and enjoy it. There's a famous speaker, he's unfortunately dead now, by the name of Hans Rosling. And he's quite a wild and crazy guy, to be honest, and quite hard to follow. He speaks really fast and he's confusing and whatever. But some of his speeches are some of the most watched talks ever produced on the internet. And the reason is he doesn't pretend to be authoritative or commanding as a speaker. He doesn't pretend to be anyone other than exactly who he is. And so he's manically moving around the stage and jumping and waving his arms because that's who he is. And equally, the most watched TED Talk of all time is a quietly spoken British professor who stands rooted to the spot, literally doesn't move at all, and he just speaks quietly the entire time. He's very understated and whatever, but he's hilarious and brilliant because he is himself. There's no good or bad types of speaker. There's simply people who are good at being themselves and people who are still learning that skill. And that's the skill to develop. Can you be yourself while you're speaking to a crowd?
For someone who's about to go on stage, Col, any tips on how to get through that performance?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the number one overarching one for me is curiosity for your audience. I think it's useful to think about the way that your attention can be directed. And if you look at it in a physical way, you can look in front of you or you can turn around and look behind you, but you can't do both at once. You can either look forward or you can look back. Similarly, your attention can either go out of you into the world around you, like the people that are in your audience, or it can look inward back at yourself, but it can't do both at once. So when you're going on stage, the trick, the key, the number one overarching skill, I think, is to have your attention facing out of you, out into the audience. And curiosity for me is the most reliable and easiest way for me to get my attention going in the right direction. If I'm curious about the people in the audience, I'm curious about what they're thinking. I'm curious about what they want. I'm curious about what they want to know, all that kind of stuff. It just means that I'm not looking back inwards at myself, which means I can't really get nervous at myself because I'm not looking at me. Anytime you're speaking, if you don't know what to say next, just get curious and ask someone in the audience what they're thinking. Anytime you're starting to get nervous, just get curious and focus your attention on a person and get into their world and see what they're thinking. If you're curious with your attention facing out into the world around you and you're curious about the people around you, I think you'll, number one, forget to get nervous. You're simply not looking at your own nervousness. And number two, you're going to deliver a much more effective speech because your presentation's not really about what you're saying. It's actually about what they're thinking. And if you're curious about what they're thinking, then what's going to come out of your mouth is going to tie in much more closely with their experience and you're going to give a much better presentation.
That was Col Fink. Business Essentials Daily is a SoundCartel podcast. Producers are Nick Schildberger, Chris Ashmore, Jeff Waters and myself. Technical production by Pete Letts. I'm Nicole Goodman. Thanks for listening. We'll bring you more Be Daily next week. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Forvis Mazars. To find out more, visit forvismazars.com/au. That's FORVISMAZARS.com/au.